watching NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mordor, coming to you live from Los Angeles. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mic Show. And today, our topic of discussion is the lying left finally beginning to realize and acknowledge the violent left? It's a question for the ages, isn't it? We're going to be talking a lot about Antifa today, and we're going to talk a little bit about who they are, and we're going to spend a little time talking about where people like this come from, what historical precedents there are for people like these Antifa cowards. And then we'll start talking about what it is we can do about it. So let's get started. Got a lot of ground to cover today. Antifa is the name that these thugs have given to themselves. It's short for anti-fascists. And what the anti-fascists do is they burn things, they smash things, they assault people, and they attempt to murder innocent, unarmed people who've got a different point of view from them, or who at least want to hear a different point of view from them. Can you see how anti-fascist all that is? We're going to beat up people who disagree with us. We're going to beat up people and strike people with bike locks and basically attempt to murder people who want to go and hear a speech that maybe we don't agree with. We're going to launch street riots, and we're going to burn things down. We're going to burn down cars. We're going to smash windows. All of this is anti-fascism. Can you see how simple it all is? They're simple people. As I said, though, it seems like maybe the tide is beginning to turn. This last protest that Antifa had at Berkeley was so violent and so out of control that even the LA Times is beginning to realize that these violent leftists might actually be a genuine problem. LA Times reports a story that basically says, after Bay Area violence, California debates classifying Antifa as a street gang. They might classify Antifa as a street gang. I think that'd be the very least they should classify them as. I think terrorist group is a little more appropriate, but in any event, they're at least starting to hit even the LA Times with just how violent and nasty they are. And by the way, I just grabbed a frame of video for this, but you can see that the little lower third there on the video basically says, experts counter that the idea of classifying Antifa as a gang could be seen as punishing a political viewpoint. If we label Antifa as a gang, that might be punishing their political viewpoint. And do you know what my reaction to that is? My reaction to that is yes. Yes. Classifying them as a gang might in fact punish their political viewpoint, because their political viewpoint is violence, attempted murder, felonious assault. Their political viewpoint is the idea that violence is a political viewpoint. Of course it should be punished. That's not speech. That's not speech, not political speech, not any kind of speech. Walking up to somebody and smashing somebody in the face with your fist or with a bike lock is not a form of protected protest in this country. It's assault. It's attempted murder. It's arson. It's all of these things. So this idea that experts, and by the way, experts, so, keep that in mind, are concerned that by calling these group of thugs a group of thugs, that might be limiting their political speech. It limits their criminal activity, which is the same thing for the left today. So there's that. So what exactly is this Antifa thing, and where did it come from? It arose fairly recently from the social justice warriors. We heard about the social justice warriors not too long ago, a couple of years ago maybe. These are a bunch of rich, bored, white college kids who have nothing else to do with their days except to show other rich, bored, white college kids just how authentic they are and how tough they are and how serious they are. These are kids who've never, ever had any kind of hardship in their lives, and they're trying to show people that they're really, 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 really tough and authentic by wearing masks and gloves and hoods and sunglasses, as you see here. All the rest, all of the marks of any given coward, they've got really down to an absolute science. A bunch of spoiled white college kids dressing up like they're some kind of revolutionaries. And the only difference between those revolutionaries and real revolutionaries is if you're a real revolutionary, you could be hurt. But Antifa knows that here in the United States, at least under Barack Obama anyway, nobody gets arrested for smashing windows. Nobody gets arrested for rioting. Nobody gets arrested for marching down the street and burning things. Those people get invited to the White House under the previous administration. That's what happens. Black Lives Matter is brought to the White House. The Attorney General says they're doing a great job. Antifa is just an outgrowth of the last 8 years of the Democratic Party using street violence as a way to get what they want politically. If the Democratic Party does not convince black Americans that there's a war going on of extermination against them, then they lose the black vote. And if they lose the black vote, they lose elections. Every one of them. They're gone. They're finished as a party. So that's what's behind all of this and these chanting, jeering cowards. And the irony of these people calling themselves anti-fascists is so large that it completely escapes them. Absolutely escapes them. So, just as a little favor, because I know most of you already know this, let's do a little look at history in terms of where the precedents of Antifa are. What kind of social precedents have there been for a group of armed thugs like Antifa? Have we seen this before, in other words? Now, most of you being educated people watching this program, you're probably familiar with most of this, but the Antifa people don't have a clue. So if somebody over at the George Soros-funded Media Matters could possibly take this down and send it over to the other George Soros-funded Antifa people, that would be a bit of an education for them. I'd consider it a personal favor if you did that. So let's go back in time a little bit, shall we? You know what? Before we do that, let's do one more thing. Let's look at what is actually being said today in terms of defense of these people by people in positions of authority. And by people in positions of authority, I'm referring to politicians and news organizations.
We have seen demonstrations, and I think we've already talked about that around the country. Young people at Berkeley protesting against this unconstitutional order. And so as we encourage our young people to get involved, I thought it was a beautiful sight.
Smashing things, burning things, setting things on fire, running guardrails through the windows of banks, at various other demonstrations, assaulting people with bike locks, people coming out of the crowd with masks on, punching somebody in the face, running away, individual unarmed citizens who are there for prayer or peaceful demonstration being beaten to the ground, knocked to the ground, kicked with guys with jack boots on, black jacketed, black pants, black boots, black gloves, black neckerchiefs, black hats, and black sunglasses, the absolute image of fascists kicking innocent people down to the ground and nearly killing them and telling them, this is for you, you Nazi. The irony of this is beyond belief, but as you can see, you just heard a Democratic congresswoman saying, we think it's a beautiful thing. Of course you think it's a beautiful thing. The entire policy of the left today is to cause riots and to cause street problems and to cause destruction and anarchy and anything that's necessary to get back the political power that they were sure was going to be theirs in November, until the American people had the nerve, the audacity to get up on their hind legs and say, no, we don't want any more of this. Well, they're going to show us. They're going to make the country ungovernable. That is the goal of Antifa. It's why George Soros is behind it and a bunch of other people. So we know that the Democratic politicians love the idea, because what could be wrong with setting fires to protest Donald Trump? You know, Cheeto Nazi. Who else is behind this kind of thing? Well, let's just pick a news organization just to say one off the top of our head. I don't know. CNN. How about them? Because here's a picture of a host of CNN show called, I think, the United Shades of America. His name is Kamau Bell. I don't know if we have that actually, but Kamau Bell, who's a host on CNN, basically up there in a podium with his fist in the air saying, we've got to continue these demonstrations and bring an end to this illegitimate, corrupt presidency. The only problem with that, Kamau, is that it's not illegitimate, it's not corrupt. The illegitimate and corrupt part is CNN. They are giving this guy who's calling for street violence and attempted murder, he's got his own show on CNN. Imagine my surprise. Imagine my surprise. So, they know what's going on. The violent left is known very well by the professional liars in the news media left to be a street gang. And that's what it is. Now, we get to the stuff that I personally find interesting, because now we can talk a little bit about history and street gangs and why they're there and why the Democrats need them there. And this is the difference, I think, really between conservatives and progressives. Conservatives, having had something of an education, understand history. And we look at history as the laboratory of human experience. We simply say that the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, or the Germans, whatever, whoever, the Romans, the Egyptians, doesn't matter. We say that human beings are essentially unchangeable and that the problems that faced the ancient Greeks and the ancient Egyptians in many ways, not always, in many ways can be found today. So if we see something happening again and again and again and again historically, and then we see the beginnings of those things starting to happen, people with an education and just a smattering of intelligence can put two and two together and figure out that 4 is not going to be very nice. So let's go back a little bit and take a look at the history of this kind of street intimidation, this street muscle. Now, despite the fact that the left does nothing but call the American conservatives Nazis, by the way, I should mention that the word Nazi is an acronym. It's a German acronym like NASA. NASA's an acronym, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Nazi is a German acronym, and it's an acronym for the German words for the National Socialist German Workers' Party. That's what Nazi means. You can't spell Nazi without Socialist Workers' Party. So they're the big government control kind of guys, just like the fascists and just like the Democrats. So let's look at a little bit of history here. I want to talk a little bit about the Nazi SA, but before I do that, let's have a look at the picture of the Nazi SS. Everybody really with an education, half an education, knows who the SS is. There's a picture of Adolf Hitler reviewing SS troops in their black uniforms. Off to the left of him, picture left on his right side, is Heinrich Himmler, a former chicken farmer who basically was the driving force of the SS. The SS originally just was, well, it meant Schutzstaffel. It was the protection squad. It was essentially Adolf Hitler's personal bodyguard. That's what the SS started out to be. It was a small group of guys who were Hitler's personal bodyguard, but Himmler said, let's make this into the elite. Let's make this into our actual organization. Let's make them the enforcers. And that's what the SS became. And it was the SS that were the prison guards at Auschwitz and the SS that murdered, prisoners of war and so on. But I'm not interested in the SS. Not today. Today I'm interested in the SA. The SA and the SS were two organizations used by the Nazis as they came to power, and they were very much in conflict with each other. And during the beginning of the Nazi reign, and well before Hitler came to power, it was the SA, not the SS, that was so powerful. You can see a picture here of Hitler in the middle of the SA. Now, this picture of Hitler is taken probably 10 years or 8 years before the one you just saw of Hitler with the SS. The SS were the execution squads of World War II, but the SA was Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party's personal, private street gang. And that's what they were. The SS was organized by Heinrich Himmler. The SA, many years earlier, was organized by a guy named Ernst Röhm. Röhm was a former World War II soldier. I think he was a captain. I'm sorry, a World War I soldier. I think he was a captain in the First World War. And Ernst Röhm basically decided that he wanted to get a private army together, and that's basically what he did. So what did the SA actually do? How did the Nazis come to power? And what did the SA have to do with it? Well, the job of the SA, I hope you're sitting down now, and I hope you guys over at Media Matters are sure to pass this on to your friends over at Antifa. The job of the SA, the brown shirts, the Nazi SA, which is Sturmabteilung. Sorry about the German, Sturmabteilung. It means the storm detachment. These were a group of thugs that the Nazis basically didn't even pay. They just gave them a uniform, something intimidating like, I don't know, brown shirts and black pants, or maybe black masks and black hoods, whatever you happen to have handy. And this street gang, this private army, went around and beat up people who didn't like the Nazis. Any questions? Any questions at all? The SA was a private army that brought Adolf Hitler to power because it went into rallies, and anybody who disagreed with Hitler or heckled Hitler were beaten up and thrown out the door. And the SA went to opposition party meetings and disrupted those and beat those people up. Very much in the same way that, Podesta, John Podesta hired people to go to Donald Trump rallies and start violent confrontations and blame it on Trump. See how this sort of thing works out? See how it works out? And by the way, those John Podesta allegations, not just me making something up, that's internal emails of John Podesta and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and all the rest admitting that the Democratic Party hires thugs to go to Donald Trump rallies and start fights to make the Donald Trump supporters look violent. This is precisely what the SA and Hitler's private army did. It's exactly what the Storm Detachment did. And there was a time just before Hitler became chancellor when the Storm Detachment, the SA, numbered something like 3 or 4 million people. 3 or 4 million. But for the previous decade of the 20s, there were certainly thousands, hundreds of thousands of them. And these were former soldiers, and they were losers, and they were drunks, and they were layabouts, and the people who couldn't find jobs. They were the people who were angry and bitter and envious and all the rest. And they really hated the Jews because that was something they could blame all of their personal failures on. And so the SA basically intimidated, beat up, suppressed opposition until Adolf Hitler was finally elected, well, not elected, he was appointed chancellor by President Hindenburg, because Hitler had taken the Nazi Party to the #2 party spot in Germany, and he did it through violent street intimidation with the SA. Hitler becomes chancellor in 1933. And here's some more news for you Antifa guys out there. This is something that you're going to really enjoy seeing if the country's ever so unfortunate to see you continue as a political group. In 1934, what was it, I want to say it was June 30th through July 2nd of 1934, something called the Night of the Long Knives happened. It was called Operation Hummingbird. And during that night, Adolf Hitler purged the SA. He basically had Rome killed. He had Gregor Strasser killed. He had a large number of the SA leaders killed because Hitler realized that the street gang had done its job, and now he had to play with the real army, and we couldn't have two armies in Germany, so Hitler simply eliminated the SA after they'd done what he needed them to do, which was 10 years of street violence and smashing windows and burning things and beating people up, which is precisely what Antifa is doing today. And they're doing it for precisely the same reasons. And the Democratic Party is allowing it for precisely the same reasons, because that's one way to get into power if you lose at the box office, which is what happened to the Nazis. The Nazis lost again and again and again and again and again. They were a joke. They were an outcast. Until finally Hitler gets enough of these guys together to beat people up. Next thing you know, they're #2 in terms of the Reichstag and the parliament and so on. It's not just Hitler, however. If you get a hold of people young enough, and if you socialize them young enough, if you get to them in kindergarten and keep teaching them the same thing through elementary school and high school and college, you will find very fertile grounds for street armies like Antifa or the SA. In the Soviet Union, they did it with a different group of people, but basically the same procedure. They started out with something called the Pioneers, which were a bit like our Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, not too horrible, but dear great leader, Father Stalin, is always revered in those meetings. And after you got out of Pioneers, you could come to Komsomol. Komsomol was basically a kind of a Hitler Youth organization, and it was basically designed for the various young people in the Soviet Union to do what the young people in Hitler's Germany were doing, which is get together, get a uniform, and be indoctrinated for their entire lives. Now, as many people in the Hitler Youth went on to the SS, and we know the horrors of the SS and the Nazis during World War II, that started with Hitler Youth. People had been taught for 15, 20 years that Hitler's a god, he's infallible, and that their nation and their race was right. You can see here Hitler Youth burning books. They have the same expression on their face, don't they, as these Antifa cowards when they're burning things. A kind of delirious sort of look, that stupid kind of look of, hey, we're smashing and burning things, look how important we are. These kids grew up to be SS murderers. They got there through SA murderers. In the Soviet Union, they had the Komsomol. The Komsomol was a great place to recruit people for the Cheka. The Cheka was the Soviet secret police, the equivalent of the German Gestapo. Here's one night's work for the Cheka. This is the Cheka's one evening of executions in the Lubyanka. The Cheka became the GPU and the NKVD, but the same thing again and again and again. Left-wing collectivists with armies using violence to get what they cannot get at the box office. There you go. And it wasn't just the Soviet Union either. Let's look at communist China and the Red Guard. The Red Guard was a group of young communist Chinese, and they would march through the towns holding up, there you can see they're holding up Mao's little red book, and anybody with an education was beaten up or killed. Anybody with any kind of dissent was beaten up or killed. And if we go to our final picture of these Red Guard murderers and lunatics. You can see the same fanatical look on these people's faces, the same fist in the air, the same gestures, the same everything that we see with Antifa today. Now, when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about what we're doing about it here at the NRA, what you can do about it at home. This is the Hot Mic Show with Bill Whittle. We'll be back in just a few minutes.